Grammy is dumb. You've probably heard that one before. After all, it's an incredibly common notion within and outside the fanbase, and people just love to go on and on about how he was so incredibly dumb, to the point that people give him IQ buffs in versus battles. If that alone doesn't tell you just how much disrespect this man gets, I don't know what else will. And it just really doesn't fly with me. I think it's honestly pretty reductive, and I feel it's a product of a gross misunderstanding of what Kubo was going for with his character. And in this video, I'll try to give my own interpretation of Grammy, his fight with Kenpachi, and the themes that Kubo wanted to establish. And yes, we are entering Thousand Year Blood Rule spoiler territory. And to understand why exactly I disagree with this notion, we'd first need to know who and what Grammy is. So, who is Grammy? Well, we know that prior to the events of the war, Grammy was sealed away in isolation from the rest of the Sternritter, due to just how ridiculously dangerous his power was. I mean, this guy could just wake up one morning and go hoppity skippity, your existence is my property, and pretty much erase every Sternritter from existence. And when you're prepping for a massive war, having your soldiers get noped out of existence is a teeny tiny bit inconvenient. So it makes perfect sense that Yuha found it necessary to keep him locked up. But what exactly does this mean? Well, I think it means that for a guy whose power is quite literally imagination, keeping him locked up is denying him one of the core things that feed said imagination: experience. Because when you think of it, outside of his small friendship with Lil Toto, there really wasn't much he could have seen or done. Meaning all he had was himself and the world as he imagined it. A world in which he was the strongest. A notion that was never once contested. Keep that in mind. Now we come to his actual debut in the story, and this man knows how to make an entrance. In his first appearance, he insta-kills Rose and Kensei, erases Gwen Ayoli from existence, and then incapacitates Yachiru before she even realizes what the hell just happened. You've noticed that there's literally no room for contingency or struggle in the face of his power. He fights exactly how you'd expect someone of his power to. And I think it's depicted this way by Kubo on purpose. And honestly, I think that's the clearest indication that this was the closest thing to actual conflict that Grammy had experienced. Now enter Kenpachi Zaraki, a man whose very existence in this moment was a product of overcoming his greatest struggle, himself. The weather-beaten blade he was now able to wield being the very embodiment and reward of that struggle. Another man who also held the title of the strongest, a title that Zaraki had literally died and risen over and over to become worthy of attaining. And it becomes clearly obvious that this was a battle between two opposites, a battle that would change one of these men forever. When the battle starts, it seems Grammy was intending to gas up Kenny due to his status as one of the 5 war potentials, and then kill him in a self-indulgent show of power like he had done with Yachiru and the others before Kenny had arrived. At least, that was the plan until Kenpachi changed everything. Kenpachi begins to question him on what he's doing and calls their encounter a fight, and questions why Grammy had no interest in proving his strength if he truly was the strongest. After all, shouldn't his believed strength be a product of multiple tests and trials against those who also believe themselves to be the strongest? It's in this question that the ideological foundation of this battle would be set. The question of what strength truly means. Is strength a self-defining absolute, or is it a product of tests and trials only defining itself through overcoming struggles? And in this moment, the central premise of the fight changes from how can Grammy kill Kenpachi to how can Grammy overpower and beat Kenpachi. This is why Grammy doesn't just insta-kill him or instantly neutralize him like he did in his earlier encounters, because for the first time ever, he wanted to prove his power not only to his enemy, but also to himself, because apparently there was more to strength than simply assuming that one was, and that fighting Kenpachi on his own terms and beating him would only serve to validate his own assumption of strength. And so Grammy would begin tossing out one obstacle after the other at Kenpachi, becoming more and more enthralled by the idea of a fight. But the deeper he fell into the joy of facing a challenge, the more consumed he got by the frustration of failure. And it's this frustration that would lead to his inevitable defeat. The necessity of struggle and how its experience can cause a person to grow is a rather recurring theme in Bleach. probably as a result of what I believe to be one of Kubo's biggest philosophical inspirations, Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is one of its many, many applications in the story of Bleach. You remember that I mentioned earlier that Grammy had been denied the experience that could grow his imagination by being locked away by Yuha. He never understood the nature of facing struggle and overcoming it. But Kenpachi, on the other hand, was born into struggle, molded by it. The very nature of the Kenpachi system, from Yachiru all the way to Kuriyashiki, Azashiro, Kiganjo, and even Zaraki, it's a system where the person who holds the title of the strongest must continuously prove their worthiness by defeating those who would challenge them for it. This is what established Zaraki as Grammy's antithesis and what made this ideological conflict so compelling to me. And now we've come to the end of this fight, which I guess was a bit controversial, and I could understand why. In Grammy's frustration at his inability to beat Kenpachi, he decides to not only imagine all of Kenpachi's power, but to even transcend it. This goes horribly wrong since he fails to imagine that only Kenpachi's body could hold that power. And then he dies. I can understand why people have questions and obviously have issues with this. And some of them might be, why didn't Grammy heal himself and just continue fighting? Or why didn't Grammy insta-kill Kenny? Which I think I've answered, so let's focus on the former. So what exactly happened when Grammy decided to replicate Zaraki's power? Because it wasn't the replication of the power that killed Grammy. That wasn't what happened. Had that been the case, Grammy wouldn't have even been able to imagine that power to begin with, but he did. And in his own words, what he failed to imagine was that Kenpachi's body was the only thing that could handle it. Why? What made the difference between Kenpachi's body and his? I mean, if you want to be boring, you could just say that Kenny's stronger. Or if you want to be even more boring, you could go on to say that Kenny's body was real and Grammy's wasn't, but come on, let's have a little fun here. What really made that difference? And what even made Kenpachi's body capable of handling the power he wielded in that moment? Well, in my opinion, I think it's struggle. Prior to this fight, Kenny fought possibly his greatest battle, facing and overcoming the limitations he had placed on himself by being killed and being resuscitated over and over and over, till he finally became worthy of gaining the title of Kenpachi, the title of the strongest. Kenpachi's body was a product of struggle. The experience from those struggles were what made him the strongest. Unlike Grammy, whose strength was never tested, challenged, or given any reason for reassessment. I think also confirming this would be how we later on find out that Kenpachi has even more untapped power, and the power he possessed when he beat Grammy wasn't even absolute, it never was. It's just another struggle that he has to work his way through to become capable of wielding that higher level of power. This is what creates the inconceivable gap between them, the gap Grammy's imagination just could not bridge, the gap of experience. The one thing Yuha never allowed Grammy to have. The one thing Grammy never considered came into play when strength was being assessed. It's this that causes his defeat. And in my opinion, I think it's Kubo's way of not only validating all the struggles Kenpachi has had to reach this point, but to also make a statement that true strength is a struggle. So why didn't Grammy just heal himself and continue fighting? Well, I think that after he failed to transcend Kenpachi's experience, he realized something. He entered this fight attempting to prove his idea of strength was the truth. After all, if he was the strongest, he should have still won even if he fought Kenpachi on his own terms. But not only did he lose, he lost while trying to imitate his opponent's power. His imagination being the strongest power was his reason for fighting. His entire physical existence was built on the idea that his power was absolute. He never needed to test that out, only to reach the very limits of that imagination and lose. In this moment, he realized that just like the ephemeral body he had created for himself, his very existence was a lie. If the imagination he prided himself on was wrong, then there was no meaning to his existence since it was defined solely by said imagination. And while saddened by this realization, he decided to imagine a world where he can't imagine anything, practically ending his existence as Grammy and reverting to simply being a brain in a container. It's honestly a bit of a bittersweet ending, to be honest. And after looking at all this, I find it difficult to reduce it to simply being a skill issue. That Grammy was simply unintelligent and that was why he lost. I don't think so. And in all honesty, you could say that Grammy is extremely inexperienced, but dumb? Absolutely not. I mean, the existence of Shaz Domino and Gwenaël Lee is probably enough proof that Grammy was anything but unintelligent. In all honesty, the best way to sum up Grammy would be going to a great university, graduating with honors, and then slowly learning that practically nothing you learn prepared you for the world waiting for you outside. And that you have no real skills, no understanding of the world around you, and with every single passing day, you start to question just what the hell you've been doing with your life for all these years. And is it just me, or are the walls starting to get closer? Yeah, that got a bit way too real for a moment there, but don't worry, it's all good. It's all fun and games around here, right? Right? Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe. You know, the YouTube stuff. Still trying to figure out the whole YouTube thing, so thank you for watching. I'm gonna go cry now.